Good afternoon, everybody. We're just ticked past 12, so we're going to make a start on our webinar. I'm going to do a little bit of an introduction to inTEC and then hand over to our speakers. That will just give people a few minutes just to join as well. So firstly, welcome to our webinar. Thanks to everybody joining for taking your time out today to join us. I'll not take up too much time in the intros. We've got some great speakers and great content to hear from. So what I will do is I'll just talk a little bit about inTEC and our background, and then we'll get into the speakers. So by way of a brief introduction, I'm Ray Bell. I'm the CTO for inTEC Group, and we're essentially a UK-wide group of ICT businesses formed exclusively through acquisition. From businesses that are specialists in various technology sectors, including sort of IT, managed service, telecoms, mobile connectivity, unified comms, and the application space, whether it's CRM, job management, collaboration tools, document management, etc. So we've got quite a wide-reaching capability in the technology sector, summarised by the three sort of boxes along the bottom of that slide. So this webinar is not really about technology or about us specifically, so I'll run through really quickly what the plan is. But I suppose this webinar coincides with the anniversary of going into national lockdown back in March 2020, and I think it's obviously the theme from yesterday is a theme of reflection, and we do the same in a technology sector in terms of what the impact has been on businesses as a result of the pandemic and the sort of lockdown that's followed. That theme of reflection, I think, is summed up quite neatly in the technology sense by this quote from Satya Nadella, the Microsoft CEO, and in that first sentence in particular, the amount of change that we have seen in businesses in a relatively short space of time, in 2 months, 2 years worth of digital change, and that was quite an early quote in the lockdown, and that pace has continued, I think realistically. And we would, and possibly my favourite quote actually that sums up for most people in terms of 2020's technology impact is the "you're on mute" phrase, and I think it's seen in all aspects of life that we have changed the way that we're changing the way we communicate and the way we work. And we would look at a review for a business in this context along the lines of what actually changed in their organisation, not just the technology, obviously that's a big part of it, but the impact on the customer, what elements of a new way of working do we retain, etc. So one area that's an absolute kind of key focus for any business is the impact on our people, and that's essentially the theme of today's webinar. And we have two great speakers that I will introduce. They will do their own introduction as part of their talk. But essentially, what our speakers will cover between them is the sort of wide-ranging area of people engagement, of culture, health and well-being, good practice, HR, process, policy, etc. All in the context of a changing world in which we kind of live and work. So I'll not take up any more of their time or steal any thunder. I'm going to hand over to Kate Wood from Pockets Consultancy as our first speaker. We do have lots of people in different locations. Is apt for these times, so hopefully the technology will be kind to us during the process. But over to Kate, who will introduce and take over from there.
Thanks very much, Ray. Hello everybody, nice to see you all remotely. So yeah, as Ray said, my name's Kate Wood and I work freelance with a number of organisations, mainly in the tech sector, but I also work with some big organisations like Michelin and some not-for-profits. And I really go into organisations and help them with their employee engagement, the HR and the culture, and really with the aim of ensuring that all of their employees feel really valued and cared for, while maximising their potential. And I'm also, as Ray knows, because he's doing a joint event with me and I'm always banging on about it, I'm on the UK Women in Tech board for the Women in Tech Network. So I'm always talking about diversity and how you can bring that cognitive diversity into your business to help you make the right decisions. So like Ray said, a year ago, we were all just experiencing almost like a crisis. And I actually looked at some notes that I'd written from a webinar I did this week, 12 months ago. And my focus then was all around helping businesses to replicate that office environment really through technology and to create that office environment. And it was all about the team. Last year was all about how we're going to still have that team spirit, how we're going to feel like a team when we can't go in the office. And now, 12 months on, and I know Flora's going to touch on this as well, it's really about the individual. So the things that I'm going to talk about and hopefully can help with is about really engaging that individual. So we've gone from the team engagement to the individual engagement. And if Ray, my wonderful assistant, is going to flick onto my first slide. There we go. So this, unfortunately, in the world of change that we're living in, is something that hasn't particularly changed over the last 5 years. So these stats are from Gallup, and while they might go up or down 1 or 2%, for the last 5 years, this has been broadly what the landscape is within businesses in multiple industries for employee engagement. So we've got 13% of global employees are actively engaged, which is quite shocking and rubbish. And 26% of global employees are actively disengaged. So my story today is going to be about how the use of technology is for collaboration, not just communication. And a lot of organisations, they've nailed over the last year that use of technology for communication, but they've not been able to get to that next step of using technology and employee engagement for collaboration. Okay, so if you go to my next slide, Ray, thanks. Then you can have a break. I'll be on this one for a while. So this starts with my story about when I was Director of Culture before I worked freelance for Chess. And 10 years ago, when I started at Chess, they were an telecoms company. They were with 60 people, all based in Alderley Edge, the jewel of Cheshire, in one office. Everybody knew each other. And similar to inTEC, they were going to grow through acquisition. So we embarked on a journey of acquisitions. And over the next 4 or 5 years, we grew from 60 people in one office to 550 people across multiple offices, 7 offices across the UK. And Scotland also. And what that meant was that those challenges that business have faced over the last year, we were facing then in 2015. Because how do you get all those people working together when they're never going to meet? How do you get a set of people based in Scotland, you know, developers, a very different type of person and a different type of role than a call centre in Burnley, you know, so it was very different. And we had to really embed that Microsoft technology at the heart of everything we did. And that started with Skype, with Yammer, and then we became a really early adopter of Teams, and we were on an early adoption piece for Teams Voice. And what we saw is that by using and training and ensuring that all of our people across all of our sites started to use this technology properly, and they didn't just use it to communicate, they were using it in a really, really rigorous way for collaboration. They were using it for productivity around the SharePoint piece, which meant that they then had a lot more time to collaborate, because you're always going to get that thing, that first thing, we've not got time when it comes to culture or employee engagement. But because they were being smarter in the way that they were working, and because we had a really structured way of communication that we trained all of our leaders on, this enabled the collaboration tools that we had to make 7 sites into one team. And the goal of Chess was to become the #1 company to work for in the UK. And when I took over this role as Director of Culture, we were 63rd in that list. Don't get me wrong, being 63rd in that list is really good, but it wasn't good enough. And I was saying we can do better, we can do better. In 2016, you know, we really embedded it. We got our cultural ambassadors involved. We drove that culture through. And in 2016, we got to be 3rd in the list, which was great. That award ceremony was amazing. You know, that was such a big leap. We knew our people felt proud, and we knew that the rigour and the structure that we'd implemented, underpinned by the technology, was actually working. 2017, we were 2nd. 2016 we wwere 2nd, 2017 we were 2nd. Again, that was proper disappointing, I'll be honest. 2018, we finally, all of those disparate people who'd never met, remote working before last year when everyone was remote working, had come together, and we'd got to be the #1 company to work for in the UK. And while I was really proud of that, what I was so proud of was to see how our people were so proud. because people will always love to talk about how proud they are of where they work. You know, our productivity went up, our profit went up, our retention went down, our retention went up and our attrition went down because people were engaged in what they were doing. Glassdoor, such a key thing. Anybody now looking for a job will go on Glassdoor. We'd managed to maintain being in the top 5 tech companies in the world on Glassdoor. And all of this through rigor, through small things and through technology. And if you go on to the next slide, Ray, please. So I know Ray referenced Satya Nadella a minute ago, and I don't know if anyone's had a chance. It came out yesterday as a report from Microsoft, and it was really quite shocking, some of the stuff that it talked about how 40% now, and this is over the last year, of the global workforce are planning to look at new roles. 46% of employees, so that's potentially 46% of your workforce, wherever you are on this call, are looking for other jobs because they can now, because everyone's working remotely. And so the things that I've been talking about with my clients, and I know Flora's going to pick up on some of these areas in more detail, are these 5 areas. So going back to what I said at the first start, we're not thinking about the team anymore, we're thinking about the individual. Mental well-being is something that we are all struggling with. You know, we're all burnt out, we're all fed up, we're all really uncertain about things. Connection, and that's where the technology piece comes in. What I really like about working with inTEC is that old urban myth about you eat your own dog food or whatever. They're using Teams in a really, really productive way. And alongside with the cultural champions, some of the small things that we've implemented around, or just a Wellbeing Wednesday, or having people from the different sites to interact and share personal stories online, has shown in the last 3 months that their Teams usage within channels has gone up 5 times. And that's direct collaboration between people in your business, which is only going to lead to collaboration around customer projects, you know, and working better together. And that's been a great example of how connections worked. Clarity. So I say to all my clients, all anyone wants now is clarity, and we can't even get it off the government, can we? I'm not sure if we ever could, but we don't feel like we can now. It changes so often. So regular, consistent updates on the same platform from the same person every week. Even if you've got no update, tell your people that you've got no update. Monotony. We are all so fed up with sitting in, aren't we? Sitting in our rooms. This Microsoft report that you should look at, it's gone up with meetings have doubled, and there's 40 billion more emails have been sent in the past 12 months. We are meeting and emailed out. Bear that in mind for your people. And then finally, surprises. It's the small things that can really help people to break that monotony, make them feel valued, and make them not think about those other stats about moving on. You know, sending something in the post, having that half-hour finish maybe, or even 10 minutes longer on the dinner time. If you surprise them, people will start to feel more valued, and it's really difficult for everyone involved. I think what it shows is that 12 months ago we were in a crisis. Now, as the term of the webinar is, this is the new normal. Companies have to step up. There's no excuses. Otherwise, they're going to lose out and people are going to step away. And that would be my short session over. So over to Ray. Thank you.
Yes, thank you, Kate. So I think just to a couple of things just wanted to mention just before we move on to the talk from Flora. We have got a Q&A feature built into the webinar, so please feel free to drop any questions into that Q&A. What we'll do is we'll look to answer a few of them live at the end of the call, time permitting, on the end of the webinar. We will also, if we don't have time or we don't cover everything, we will gather a sort of an FAQ document together and send that out to everybody after the session. So just before we move on, just a couple of things to pick up on what Kate said from our side. So Kate works with us on our internal kind of culture change and employee engagement piece, and I think it's absolutely clear to us that the technology is only part of the answer. It's the getting people to buy into why we use it and how we use it, and it's sometimes it's just simply replacing the conversation you normally have in the corridor or over a coffee or whilst in passing, but to keep that sort of personal interaction going with people, which is really, really important. And I think that stat about meetings in particular is really important, because I think not only is it that burnout challenge of time spent on meetings during the day, but fundamentally we need time to do the stuff that comes from the meetings and comes from the sessions. So it's all well and good doing 8 meetings where we used to do 2 or 3, but actually where's the time for the follow-up? So a good hint that we always pass on is building that focus time, building that follow-up time into the diary, so that it doesn't just get filled end to end in meetings. I think it's particularly important, and that potentially also facilitates stepping away from the screen and getting that sort of health and well-being focus as well. But at the risk of stealing any more thunder, what I'll do is I'll hand over to Flora from Citation, who's basically going to cover off her slides and run them through directly. So over to you, Flora.
There you go, first person to say I'm on mute or I'm not on mute. Okay, thank you very much for inviting us to speak to you all today, and I'm going to just talk through a variety of things, very much in line with what Kate just talked about there as well, and it's very much about getting it right. As Kate said, there are some key things here that you need to be focusing on, and 2020 obviously did not go to plan in any shape or form for anybody, but well-being and engagement have most certainly been on the agenda for businesses. Definitely we've been talking a lot more about it in terms of employment law and health and safety in the last few years, but certainly this year for everybody, engagement and well-being need to be a real focus, and that's the kind of key thing. So that's what we're going to talk about just now. We know it's been so challenging and there's been so many stresses and strains from every business, and it's easy to overlook a lot of things, and I think a lot of it has been overlooked slightly in terms of people's engagement and well-being. So, and proactively supporting your employees' well-being is key to that happy working environment and to make a positive impact in your business. It absolutely does, and as Kate said, she's witnessed that and brought it right through to being a #1 organisation by doing exactly that. And it is fundamental now in employment law and in health and safety that you do get it right and you do have that focus of employee well-being. Some stats then, 1.6 million work-related ill health cases reported. 51% of these cases were due to stress, anxiety or depression, and 19.8 million working days lost as a result. Now, what I would say is as well, these are prior to COVID. I'm not sure that, I would want to think about what the stats are for during COVID. They are, they really are going to change significantly, and it's there's lots of different sectors have different sort of challenges, but through every sector we see results that stress, anxiety and depression and general mental health and general well-being are a real challenge and keep coming up. And why is employee well-being important? Why does it matter? It can result in a lot of things if people don't have good well-being, good health and well-being. And I will say, when we talk about health and safety, which we do a lot, we tend to focus very much on the safety aspect, but now the health aspect of it is it's always been as important, but it's never had the focus in the same way in an organisation as it's going to have now. The bottom line is you can't run your organisation without your people. You are only as good as the people that you have in your business. So you need to make sure that they are firstly getting the right person in the door, obviously, but also that they are looked after, their well-being is good, their health is good, to allow for them to be the best they can be in your organisation, and all ties in together. A successful business isn't somebody who doesn't focus on well-being. They absolutely are, and they have lots of tools in place, and like Kate said, people feel like they're really valued and they matter. Your employees have to have confidence in you. people feel like they have suffered a loss, and whether that's a loss of meeting somebody, like Ray said, at the coffee machine, or having a chat at the water cooler or whatever else, or whether it is that they feel like they have you know, lost their social interaction, because for a lot of people, going to work was, you know, the biggest social event or the biggest social aspect of their life, as you know, meeting people, just that general. So there is a real sense of loss in people, and they feel like, you know, they've been robbed of something in a lot of ways. So you need to recognize what they are. And again, you know, I harp on about, you know, speaking to people, communication. But when I say communication, I don't just mean communicating out, I mean communicating back in, having an actual conversation with somebody and finding out what they feel like they've lost. Do you actually know? Has MD actually asked? Have you, you know, consulted with your employees to find out what they feel like their biggest loss has been? You can't assume that you know what that is. So it's really key to make sure you have those discussions with them. It really matters because, as again Kate mentioned, burnout, it's, you know, very, very apparent right now that lots of people are suffering from that, employees and employers. Don't forget about yourself as well, and I think we're quite good at forgetting about ourselves. You know, confidence, again, low confidence in the workplace leads to all sorts of issues, and again, that, you know, Kate mentioned clarity, and there has been a serious lack of clarity, I think, in the last 12 months in all aspects. Nobody has a crystal ball, and nobody expects you to have a crystal ball, but they most definitely are looking for that clarity and confidence in you as their employer, as to what's going to happen to their job, what's going to happen to the organisation, what's going to happen when we come to the end of furlough. And again, you know, all the goals have all been shifted because everybody thought, okay, this is when furlough is going to come to an end, then it's been extended, and then it's been extended again. And as a result, there are changes in every organisation. So that confidence and clarity has to be there. And it is really, really key that you are consistent with that as well, and making sure that, yep, people do have an understanding. Transparency, don't tell lies, don't make it up. Transparency is key, because if people feel like you are being open and honest with them, that builds that confidence. You know, telling somebody, yeah, don't worry, your job's absolutely fine, but you know, why? This is where the business is sitting. This is our future plans for the business. This is, you know, what we've done. This is what we've put in place. All these kind of things build confidence, and that is really, really key. It's about creating a culture of presenteeism and not having a negative culture of absenteeism. And very quickly that can change. So it's really focusing on that, and, you know, make sure that it is a positive working environment that people are in. And that is tricky, absolutely, is, particularly when you're not in an office with somebody, or on a workplace, or on site, or whatever else. Ask your employees what their concerns are. Do you actually know? Have you ever asked? 60% of adults surveyed said they felt stressed or anxious as a result of their well-being affected by COVID. You know, it's these kind of things that really you need to have an understanding of, because if you don't have a real understanding of it, then, you know, how can you help, how can you support, how can you make sure you're putting the right things in place? And it is about having the right things there to help. So think about currently, what tools do you have in place to manage your employees' well-being? Yeah, what tools do you provide? And, you know, if you're not writing that down now, please do at some point think about, okay, what tools do I actually provide? And I don't mean communication tools, I mean actual well-being tools. You know, what do you have there? What support do they have? For example, an external thing like employee assistance programs, you know, they're a big thing at the moment. And if you do have one of them, I don't doubt you've been using it hugely in the last 12 months. But, you know, there are lots of challenges right now. And if somebody comes to you and says, as we are already seeing, you know, as a result of lockdown, I've maybe got an alcohol issue, I've maybe got a drug issue, I've got whatever else, you're probably not qualified to deal with that. So how do you deal with it? How do you support that person? How do you assist them to help themselves? And, you know, it's all tied up together. If you've got something like an external support system there in some way, so your EAP or something, you know, where they can access and get support from professional experts to help them turn that around, it's a win-win from everybody. employees. So, and there's lots of different ways. It doesn't need to be, you know, expensive. They don't need to be complicated. There's loads of ways that you can support people and, you know, and make sure that their well-being is being looked after. The key thing is as well to monitor it, yeah, so that you know what you're doing is working and it's right as well. So having an open door policy seems like a really obvious one, but is it really an open door policy? I hear lots of people saying, yeah, we have an open door policy, but really, do you? How available is that? How available are you to people? Employee assistance program I've touched on, encouraging physical activity. Again, you know, it seems like an obvious one, but prior to this, lots of people were having people coming in and doing massage, doing exercise classes, all these kind of things. But have you transferred that into the digital work environment? How can you transfer it? Is it possible? What could you do? Have a buddy system, checking in with staff to make sure they're taking breaks. You know, I've heard of people being completely dehydrated because they're not walking past the water cooler and they're sitting at their laptop 8 hours a day. It's not healthy and it's not good and doesn't make for a healthy employee. Make sure that, you know, when you do ask somebody, and we're all very good, yep, how are you? Great, thanks very much, and move on. Genuinely ask somebody how they are and then be prepared to listen to the answer and actually, you know, listen to the answer and act on that answer as well. Allow people to have breathers to reset and recharge. Ray touched on that as well. You know, we're all very good at back-to-back meetings, and before you know it, you've not had lunch, or you've grabbed something really quick, you've got indigestion, and it's 6 o'clock at night, and you've still got loads of work to do. And it's there in front of you, so do you know what, we'll just do a couple of extra hours, or we'll do a bit of the weekend. You know, we're not allowing that reset, recharge time that maybe people had on the bus to work, or going out for their sandwich at lunchtime and whatever else. So working together through difficult decisions. I've, you know, a lot of people who've they feel like they've lost that camaraderie in the office, or, you know, sharing, what would you do about this, or I'm struggling with this, whereas they maybe don't phone somebody and ask them, or you know, have a Zoom with them and say the same. So again, could be a big thing that's missing. Keeping staff informed, as I said, be transparent, be upfront, make them feel like you've informed, they feel engaged as a result of that. End of shift wellbeing checks, simple things like that can have make all the difference and have a huge impact. Internal communication, and I always say to people, how's your communication? And people say, great, yeah, fantastic. Yeah, I'm not asking about how you communicate out. How do you allow that communication in? Yeah, and you know, you've communicated, I'm sure, loads because of your COVID stuff, and you're making sure you're COVID compliant and secure, and risk assessments and all that. So there's loads of communication going out. What have you asked for back from your organisation and from everybody within that? You know, so engage with everybody, look at what your communication strategy is, and does it work? Does it need to be updated? Does it need to change? You have a duty of care to take all reasonable steps to ensure the health, safety and well-being of your employees. You know, that's your compliance. And as a result, you know, you need to also be thinking about your home working, because that is a big thing right now. And it was all done very quickly, as we know, 12 months ago. But you know, how successful has it been? Actually do an analysis on that. What else can we do? How could we support? And again, engage with these people. It's easy to hide behind a Zoom. Do you know how somebody's really feeling? You know, when did you last do a survey of people? When did you last engage properly? And engaged employees want to make a difference. They want to know that their talents are used. Nobody wants to just, you know, feel like they're doing all their work and all they do is spend time just doing their job and about making a company money. Nobody wants to feel like that. Everybody needs to feel a sense of purpose. And they need, you know, it's about aligning the business goals with the individual employee goals. And that can really invigorate people and give them that clarity and direction that they need. Create that positive working environment, because it's really, really important. There are a huge amount of business benefits, and, you know, in every sector, it doesn't matter what business sector you're in, it's important right now that you are focused on this. Your engaged employees will be the people you want to clone in your business, because they will go the extra mile, because they can see why, they have an understanding of the business needs, and they know that you are absolutely invested in them. And that's the key thing. Everybody needs to feel valued. You know, you've got higher attendance rates, you've got more innovation, ideas, creativity, all these things that every business strives to have. But through your wellbeing engagement, that's how you're going to, and keeping a hold of the talent you've got. That's the important thing. all your health and safety and HR all feeds into all of this, and it's really key that, you know, you've got those foundations in there. They are the foundations in your business. If you look after your well-being, engagement, and your well-being of your employees, you will find that actually, you know, that environment creates itself and the culture creates itself. And you know, you need to do it from top down, bottom up, all round about. It's got to be the behaviour and the leadership behaviour throughout. That's kind of all I'm going to talk about today. A Citation as an organisation, we can help with that, and by all means ask away with any questions or whatever, and we can pick up with you for anything further. But thanks.
Thanks, Flora. What we've worked with Citation over a number of years as a business, and I think you know, their support, as Kate's has been invaluable for us, guiding us through some of these challenges and this advice. I think we've got some questions that I'm going to just run through just in the final part of the webinar, and some of it does pick up on the content in the themes that was mentioned by both speakers. So I'll kind of direct them to the guys as and when they come through. So hopefully we'll be able to get everybody on voice so you can hear them. So the first one, it's sort of a question really, which should sum up as being, you know, what makes a good home working environment. I'll give a bit of a technology answer to that, and then I'll see if I can hand over to maybe Flora as well, thinking about that duty of care extension. So from a technology viewpoint and a working environment viewpoint, I think the first thing I would say is connectivity is absolutely key. I think we find a lot of home broadband in particular isn't particularly suitable for business use, especially when you've got other people working from home, or you've got, you know, kids at home and those other demands on the broadband line. It's also potentially using, you know, retail consumer providers of broadband such as Sky, etc. You know, you can't access their routers to set up the necessary security, etc. So I think, you know, business broadband at home, I think, is an important one to potentially think about if working from home is a long term thing. I think the equipment in kit's really important. Just fundamentally spending a lot of time on a screen, you know, that small laptop screen is an extended monitor that would help. Maybe, you know, good quality headsets, particularly with the challenges of everyone having to hear and listen and contribute to a call. I think it's also a really good tip and a good hint. The actual desk and working environment, and I'll probably see if Flora wants to jump in here as well, but it's difficult, this one, because, you know, not everyone's got the same setup at home. Some people have to use the kitchen table, some are having to use bedrooms, having to use spare rooms. It's a very sort of difficult environment, but where possible, you know, getting a good chair, good desk with good screen position, getting the sort of ergonomics of the desk layout is I think it's where possible is really important. Is there anything? Flora, can you?
Yep. No, I
yeah.
agree with all those things, and you do, you know, just what you were saying there, Ray, you do have an obligation under, from an employment law point of view as well. You've got an obligation there as an employer, because it doesn't, you're responsible and have a duty of care to look after somebody's health, safety and well-being wherever the workplace is. It doesn't mean they're in a workplace or on site. If that is home, then you've got a responsibility there as well. So it's making sure that, yep, you've fulfilled your obligation, and you've been compliant with it. You should have carried out, you know, a risk assessment and all these kind of things, but it's giving people guidance on, you know, because they've maybe never worked from home in the longer term as well. So one day a week was fine sitting on the sofa, but already we are seeing people with serious musculoskeletal issues because they've been sat on the sofa or on their bed or at the edge of a table or whatever else for 8, 10, 12 months, sometimes more, because a lot of businesses shut down, you know, or started working from home in kind of February. So again, you've got to provide education, advice, and, you know, just general on working environment. On, you know, I was speaking to a lady the other day who an issue with an employee who was having real headache, real issues and real struggle with headaches, and that's what I was talking about. She was actually really dehydrated because she was just sitting down, being super busy, not eating properly, not passing the water cooler, 8 times a day or whatever she reckoned she was probably having, and having a quick glass on the way past. So it seems like really obvious, but you've got to remember, for a lot of people this is new, and it's, you know, you've got to, you train them when you come into the office. You've got to help train them and you know, guide them on what a good working environment is in the home. In an ideal world, everybody would have an office and a desk and a, you know, a wrist rest and a foot rest, but the reality of that is it's not, you know, going to happen. But absolutely, like you're saying, the right kit. And something you touched on there as well is making it clear to people, you know, if they have an IT issue, what do they do? You know, who do they go to, or do they spend the next 8 hours, you know, pulling, if they're anything like me, I'm not very good with tech, and pulling their hair out and ready to throw their laptop out the window. But, you know, it's providing that guidance, having a policy in place, having a strategy there that they know, right, okay, if I've got an issue, I can get support here. So no, absolutely, it's key to, you know, get, you know, just to again properly set it up with them.
Yeah,
Kate, I think.
Perfect. Yeah, thank you.
Can I just give a couple of ideas that are just things that I've seen really work, just that even in the last couple of weeks with a couple of my clients. One is, you know, when I spoke about monotony, it's really about encouraging, and it goes back to speaking to the individual. Even if somebody can just for a day move into another room and try, I know not everyone has the luxury of having multiple rooms in the house, but even if you move your chair into a different position, so that you're looking at something different, or the table or anything, that can have a really, really big positive impact on people. Just that really tiny small change, which is affordable, hopefully for people. And then the other thing that works wonders, and again, you know, it's not accessible to everybody, but going on a walking meeting, we're sick to death. I am sick to death at looking at my own fringe on video all day, you know, absolutely sick of it. And so what I do now loads of the time, get on a walking meeting, and if maybe you're not as able, or you can't get out to walk, you've got other people in the house, even if you can, go on your front doorstep if you've not got a garden. But, you know, just trying that different thing, but getting out in the spring air, if it's available to you, will change things for you.
Super, thank you, Kate. A couple more questions come in just around, I suppose they're almost leadership-based questions, really, about how we may adapt leadership approach and style when we've got people working remotely. And I guess this brings really to the forefront a question of trust a lot of the time, and it is challenging for different roles that need to be run in different ways. So we will cover this subject in more detail in one of our following webinars, particularly there. But I guess from my personal view, and I can open it out to the guys as well, is I think it is that question of, you know, you bring in good people, you hire them based on trust, and ultimately moving that style of leadership away from, you know, being input driven, you know, is important. You know, being focused more on the outputs, you know, that people have got that sort of different working day, that different flexibility. What are the KPIs? What are the goals? What are the outputs that are important, rather than the, you know, if they're not in the office, they're not doing the work approach. So I think there is a change of mindset, but that's notwithstanding the fact that some roles that's just not possible. It's just not practical or reasonable to do that as well. And certainly, you know, people starting out in the working journey, and there might be a higher requirement for supervision. You know, there's always exceptions to it, but I suppose the theme there is, you know, can we move more to, where possible, being output driven? Do we have the tools and the capability to measure outputs rather than inputs? Is there anything, Kate or Flora, you'd want to add to that question about changing leadership styles?
I think for me, if you don't mind, that goes back to something else that I touched on, which is clarity. So many people, and I can't remember the stats, so I'm not going to make it up, don't actually fully understand what is expected of them within their role and within their day-to-day job. So of course, you know, they need to be checked up on if they're not clear on what they should be doing, and so I completely agree with going back, like you say, looking at outputs. And, you know, and that goes back to getting feedback from people and being open and having things in the diary, you know, just the basics of diary and time management. Do people understand time management and how to do it? Can they use the tools that you've provided with them with? You know, do they understand all of the things that Outlook and, you know, SharePoint and these things that can do to help them? You know, and that's about a two-way conversation. A perfect example, just very quickly, was yesterday. I was on a call with KPMG, and a really senior person at KPMG, obviously big organisation, and they'd finally, after a year, gone to meet a client. So they'd gone to London, obviously not been anywhere, you know, for a year, got back to looking on the phone on the train, and they were getting so many chaser emails, and he didn't understand why. He was like, oh, you know, I'm not the quickest at returning to, you know, replying to email. He said, but normally you'd get like a 48 hour before people chase you. And it's that fact now of the fact that people have just been in front of the screen. You know, how are we going to move to that hybrid working when expectations are reset? Because people know that people have been at the screen for 12 months and that they can instantly reply. Leaders are expecting that. And actually, as the world opens up, that's not the case. So it's another thing that needs to be reviewed from a leadership point of view.
Perfect, thank you. And just to wrap up, then there's a couple of questions that will kind of umbrella under a technology theme, just to finish with. So the first one really is, I guess, is a question about comparing the various tools that are available for collaboration and communications: Zoom, Slack, Teams, etc., etc. And there are many others. So one thing to point out, and we can send this out as a link afterwards. We've done quite a useful sort of comparison guide across those technology platforms in terms of the benefits or the differences between them. I think broadly speaking, in our experience, they fall into more of a communications tool and a category, and that's where, you know, Zoom is very strong as a video calling tool, as a communications tool in that regard. I think we certainly would heavily promote Teams, because it takes that extra step in our view into being more of a collaboration platform, particularly around document sharing or information sharing, or just even social interaction in sharing through the extra functionality that having that capability built in comes from. So there's really it is very much around what's right for each business, but we will forward a link to that tool, which I think helps, so that comparison document, which helps really articulate the differences between the platforms. Link to that, just in terms of what we're using. Somebody's asked what we're using for this webinar, and this is using Teams, but it's using the Teams live event functionality. So another example of perhaps a tool that people have used but not used it fully. So live event is already part of Teams, and it's just got that extra features around the sort of questions, the moderator functionality, and the lining up the speakers, etc. So a good platform for if anyone wanted to run their own events. So I think that probably covers most of the questions, and we are getting towards the end of the session. We will send out some sort of free FAQs, if you like, afterwards, and some links to some useful stuff. It just sort of rests with me just to say thank you firstly to our speakers, Kate and Flora, for their input on the session, and their support for inTEC as well, and to everyone who's joined the call. Again, thank you for taking the time out. These are busy times and busy days, and sort of appreciate the time you've taken to give to the call. We've got some information on screen which we'll leave as we close the webinar, so take a note of our email address or our website if you need to find out any information or introductions to any of the organisations that have spoken today. But yes, once again, thank you. Enjoy the rest of your day, and yes, thanks very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.